Let's get some analysis now. We're joined by political analyst Suzanne Boyson, Professor Boyson, and Sanusha Naidu, as well as political science lecturer at the Northwest University, Seisman Mutlaung. Let me start with you, Sanusha. How effective is the strategy that the president has been using to admit that things have gone wrong, yes, but also to say, look at the caliber of the new councillors that we are now offering?
Good afternoon, Francis, and to my fellow colleagues. I think it's part of the way he's come in terms of his presidency. You know, he came in with this idea that the presidency has to be about taking a much more professionalized approach. He talks about this a lot in terms of professionalizing the way in which government operates, rooting out corruption, dealing with capacity and capability, but also talking about the efficiency and rooting out what are some of the deep-rooted issues with regard to efficiency and services, and in terms of how they need to govern and in terms of governance. And you see a lot of that in terms of some of the snippets that we have picked up in the media with regard to what is going to be in this election manifesto, and also from the interviews that your reporter had done on the ground. For example, one of the things that's quite interesting is the promise to do better. Now, it's a very broad kind of rhetoric, you know, the promise to do better, but also acknowledging that the capacity to deliver, the capability of the candidates and how they need to serve in the interest of the people, go out and not just see it as a job that gives them a livelihood, but see it as something that is about public administration and service and governance. And the progress, I think I found the one line that was quite interesting in one of the news reports to say that progress has not been sufficient. I think that's just so broad. Sufficient is not necessarily what you would talk about. It's really about whether it has addressed the fundamental structural conditions of people's lives and livelihoods at the grassroots. Yeah. And I think to a large extent, the quality of services again. So I think he's trying to measure how you would act in a business setting, but bring it in terms of the public service and the public sector governance and administration.
Yeah. And I guess there has to be some candidness given what has happened in the past 5 years, the looting of COVID-19, those tenders, the Zondo Commission, many problems in local municipalities. Seisman, do you think we can sum this up as the ANC saying, give us another chance?
I would think the ANC would always want, any political party would always want another chance. So for many years, they've been asking for this other chance. So what I think the people want to think about is how has the ANC been effective in fulfilling the promises, and how has it been able to hold accountable the officials that have been seen to be corrupt. So the public sentiment is mainly around those, and that is what also discourages people to say, we've entrusted the ANC and it has failed. It's like they only remember us when it's time for elections, but generally there's been a poor level of administration at the local level. If you would remember Mr. Mbalula a few weeks ago, could only maybe talk to one metro to say this is a good story for a country that is governing the whole, for a party that is governing the whole country, and he could only pick up one example. So that was very telling in how far the ANC is wanting in terms of picking out good examples to allay the negative sentiments among the people currently.
Suzanne, if nothing else, is the party being responsive to claims that its top officials are always old? There's been a lot of emphasis on youth.
Yes, indeed. We've seen President Ramaphosa really focusing on so many dimensions in the last few days of telling voters of why it is actually a new ANC, a new set of candidates that will be elected this time around, and not the usual set of culprits, or not those people who were not capable, who were not honest, ethical, credible, reliable, accountable, etc. We've heard Mr. Ramaphosa referring to so much turnover, around 45% or so new people coming in as candidates. That's the level of women just below 50%, young people over 25% or up to 25% of them are young people. So really trying to emphasize that this is a new set of people, not the, can I say, the old ANC, who will be coming in to hopefully take over from the older, more discredited councilors. So there's really been an emphasis by Ramaphosa that the ANC can do things at a new level, of a higher level. And this comes across as part of the multi-dimensional message that I think we'll see in this manifesto, not just the straight message of necessary to deliver services. Ramaphosa and the ANC knowing that it doesn't necessarily have credibility because they are making mistakes, admitted to having made mistakes, and now they have to persuade a very skeptical, even more skeptical and cynical electorate than South Africa has seen before, that this same party is a renewed party, despite many other previous undertakings that it is actually already a new party, that this is now a very new ANC that can really govern differently and deliver better on its promises and persuade the electorate. And that will be a very steep task, that these are credible institutions, that local government structures are actually credible and working. He has to persuade voters to believe that, even while we see not just the broken promises, but broken institutions all around us when it comes to local government.
Sanusha, that is a hard task. Do you think that the ANC can convince South Africans who may be thinking about what they're doing this time around, that this time it can offer great candidates?
Yeah, I think Susan is right. It's a steep incline to climb, and even steeper than going up Mount Everest at times or wherever. But I think the problem here is how convincing the president has to be in persuading the electorate. I think the experience on the ground, the experience not just amongst the people whose lives have been always on the periphery, but I think even in the middle class now, when you start to see those broken institutions and how they operate, when you see the middle class also having its own difficulty in understanding where this persuasion is going to come from, that's going to be the big convincing task that he has to do. And I think at times, when you even think about how the step-aside rule was implemented in order to deal with this kind of multidimensional issues around corruption, around dealing with people who have just been, not fit for purpose to serve in a governance position or serve as public servants or serve at local government level, that also has become very controversial. It has been meshed in so much of uncertainty, controversy, and so forth, that people also became kind of unconvinced that it works. And so I think the bigger question is not just persuading or convincing, but actually saying it's going to work this time. So as Seisman says, every party wants to promise. I mean, the DA made some very interesting comments in their launch of their manifesto over the weekend as well. They claim clean audits in 5 municipalities in the Cape Metro. But, in the broader scheme of things, 5 out of 250 plus or 200 and whatever, it's not that big, but it looks big because if you compare it to where the ANC is, it's not doing well. It's really in a serious situation. So it's interesting when you actually look at those dynamics. So I think the ANC has a bigger task to convince. Other political parties have not an easier task, but it just makes it that much more simple in terms of whether or not they can actually sit back and say, well, the ANC has done this. So we are basically offering you something that we can do. But at the end of the day, I think 3 things come to mind for me: trust, legitimacy, and credibility for all political parties and all experiences that people have on the ground.
Seisman, let's look at how this is being conducted after the manifesto launches at the weekend. One was virtual, one in person, defying COVID-19 regulations. The ANC says it will stick to the size of the crowd and have this hybrid event. That seems to be a good way to go. Do you agree? But then I remember a few years ago, people were analysing the size of the crowds, especially the ANC, as a litmus test of of the excitement of the support. In a way, does the current situation protect all parties from that?
Yeah, I would think the picture would be a bit different when we compare the size of a crowd for a local elections and national elections. So I think the vibe and the fuss is when we are at the national elections at the most. And under the circumstances, what the ANC would be doing, if today they stick to the regulations in terms of the capacity of a crowd, is only for today. The previous days, that has not been an issue under control. They have been breaking that regulation, which is, we had today, Malema was also complaining about it. Why is it an issue when it's for EFF? And it opens again another debate socially where churches have been fighting, businesses have been fighting, being locked out. But when it's politics, these regulations are relaxed. But I think the ANC today would want to be responsible. They would want to show that picture of complying with the rules. But a positive thing is also where we understand now people don't have to be physically in an environment, a particular space, to show their support. When we go virtually, we're also expanding our participation in terms of digital participation, and maybe on the ground we hear people say even voting, we may as well go voting electronically. So I think it's exciting, and it's a good test for our political development to see how do we respect political freedoms, yet physically people are restrained in a particular manner.
All right, unfortunately, we're running out of time. Let me end with you, Susan, just a general prediction. The ANC obviously doesn't want to lose more support in metros. It wants to gain support. How do you think it'll fare in this local government election?
Francis, it's such a crucial issue there, because the ANC, we know, in 2016 didn't do very well and lost outright control of the big metros and several other places. In local government by-elections, subsequently, there have only been a few batches of them, but there the ANC did relatively well, did not really lose seats, took a few seats here and there of other parties, for example, of the DA. But in the meantime, that seems to indicate that the ANC could be on a recovery path. However, we also look at the recent fiascos in the ANC, how the ANC has been embarrassing itself party politically, although President Ramaphosa refers to that as an open organization, they're visible for everybody to see. But then on top of that come so many of the reports, including further reports of corruption and wrongdoing, misappropriation of public funds just today as well. And we do not yet know how these developments will be affecting ANC support. It's in the next few weeks, and definitely by the 1st of November that we'll get the final answer as to what the ANC will be doing. Because if not, we're certainly on that path for more and more coalition governments, which can also be a very destructive and unstable form of government.
Yeah, and it's pretty soon, right? Until we know. Thank you very much. That's some analysis for you ahead of the ANC Manifesto launch tonight. We were joined by political analyst Professor Susan Boyson and Sanusha Naidu, as well as political science lecturer at the Northwest University, Seisman.